I talk to people every week that make the move to Fort Lauderdale, and after helping countless families relocate here, I've noticed the same patterns and surprises that keep coming up over and over again. So before you make the move, here's 10 things that you need to know that could save you time, stress, money, and help you avoid making the wrong decision. So let's get right into it. 10 things that you need to know about living in Fort Lauderdale. And number one is that Fort Lauderdale is big. And when I say big, I'm not just talking about the city itself. I'm talking about the entire metro area or Broward County. It's about 430 square miles of livable area with almost 2 million people. And Fort Lauderdale, the city, it's just a small part of it. And what's great about it is you're not confined to just living in the city limits if that's not your lifestyle. You can go southwest if you want land. You can go west and northwest if you want gated communities. And while yes, it is large, it's not one of those metro areas that's gonna take you an hour and a half or 2 hours to drive to downtown or the beach. And honestly, you could still be 10 miles away and get there fairly easily whenever you want to. But getting this phase of the research down before you decide to make that move is probably one of the best things you could do for yourself. And like I always say, it's important to find the areas that you like, but it's more important to rule out the ones that you hate. And before we go any further, make sure to grab my free South Florida relocation guide, which breaks down info on different areas, schools, commuting, cost of living, and everything else you need to know. You can download that at the link in the description. Now this one's kind of interesting. Because the Fort Lauderdale metro area is so big, it actually has a few different climates. Yes, microclimates here are a real thing. On the coastal side in areas like Lighthouse Point, Fort Lauderdale, Pompano Beach, you get more of that ocean breeze that just keeps things a little bit more mild. And I guess because you get that ocean breeze, the mosquitoes aren't as bad out here, and you'll just notice that the weather tends to feel a little bit more stable. Now, when you head out west into areas like Weston, Coral Springs, or Parkland, it's a completely different feel. You're out near the Everglades, it's swampier, the air feels heavier, more humid, and you tend to see those thunderstorms kind of build up pretty quickly. And it's pretty common to see a huge wall of rain out towards the west side. And then if you look east, it's completely clear. And what's really interesting is how those microclimates impact real estate. Homes out east tend to be a little bit older, but pricier because of the location with quick access to the beach. But you're also gonna deal with higher insurance costs, potential flood zones, and a little bit more salt exposure, which just means more maintenance. Head out west and you'll usually find the newer homes, more affordable insurance, and just a little bit more value for your money. But you're trading that coastal breeze and location for a little bit more humidity and longer commute times. Another thing that surprises people when they move down to Fort Lauderdale is that we're literally in the tropics. We live in a tropical climate, which is unlike living basically anywhere else in the country. Even the west coast of Florida, climate's much different than here. And everything here, from the plants to the bugs to the way homes are built, is designed to handle this tropical environment. So what does that actually mean, a tropical climate? Well, like we already spoke about, the weather, it's hot and humid, it's sticky. We get tropical rain bands that can just come out of nowhere. But we also get this short break in the winter where it's nice and mild and feels more like springtime would in the rest of the country. Then there's the wildlife and bugs, which if you're coming from the West Coast or the Midwest, is probably something that catches people off guard the most. Seeing lizards, iguanas, and peacocks, it's just different. But the big one, and the one that frightens a lot of people, especially when it comes to purchasing a home, is termites and ants. And yes, they're just a part of life here. And most homes just have regular pest service built into their maintenance routine throughout the year. So it's not so much about avoiding termites completely, it's more so about managing them. So I just wanna make it clear that when you see termites out here, or an inspection report shows a home that had some termite activity, it's pretty common when you live in a tropical climate. And because of this climate, the homes down here are built completely differently too. They use a lot of concrete construction as compared to wood, but you still do see wood frame homes down here. And let me just tell you something. If you see a wood frame home, chances are it was probably pre-1950, 100 years old. And if that home is still standing, that home's not going anywhere. But overall, living in a tropical environment just means you need to keep up with maintenance, maybe a little bit extra on your home, keeping your roof clear of debris, trimming back palm trees, things of that nature. On the flip side, that's exactly what makes this area so unique. The landscaping, the fact that it's green all year long when the rest of the country is still shoveling out snow. One thing you'll figure out really fast once you move to Fort Lauderdale is that it's a driving metro area. Plain and simple. We don't have subways. Public transportation does exist, but it's very limited. And most locals here just don't rely on it for their day-to-day use. Now, we do have the trains, whether it's the Tri-Rail or the Bright Line, which could be a great option if you're commuting between counties for work, north and south only. But if you're looking for that east-west transportation, you're just not gonna find it. Now, the good news is that Broward County does have plans to change that with the Primo light rail system. And the key is to eventually connect key east-west routes throughout the entire county with light rail and rapid bus systems, which would be a complete game changer for people who live inland. But the key word is eventually. We're still years away from that being built, and for now, Fort Lauderdale is and will remain a driving metro area. And just to set expectations when it comes to driving, it can feel a little bit different than where you're coming from, and it most likely will. Traffic's not as bad as LA or even Miami, but it can still clog up during rush hour, when the drawbridge is open, or even when it rains, which in the summer is pretty much every afternoon. But these are things that you kind of learn to manage once you're out here. You learn how often each of the bridges actually open. So these are kind of things that you'll get used to. Point being, if you're moving from somewhere like Chicago or New York City, where you're used to taking public transportation everywhere, Fort Lauderdale might take a little getting used to. The next thing is that Fort Lauderdale has a very real busy season, which we call snowbird season. It usually starts picking up around mid to late November. I would say right around Thanksgiving week is when you really notice it. And around that time, restaurants are packed, traffic increases, the beach starts getting more crowded, and you'll start seeing more out-of-state plates on the road. And then comes March, which is basically the peak. It's when spring break happens. It's basically the entire month. And then in the middle of that, you have St. Patty's Day, where Las Olas closes down, and they have a parade and bar crawls and the detours, and traffic is just completely insane during this time. And don't get me wrong, it's great for the economy, but for a lot of people who live here during the month of March, a lot of locals go into hiding. And then right after that, things start to calm down. By May, tourism starts to wean out a little bit. It starts to feel more open on the roads, the restaurants are less crowded, and the beaches start feeling open again. Now, one thing that really never slows down in Fort Lauderdale is the event scene. No matter what time of year it is, there's always something going on. It's much more than just beaches and boating. This place runs on festivals and shows and different community events. And it doesn't matter if you're in downtown Fort Lauderdale, on the beach, or even out in the suburbs, there's basically something for everybody. And let's start with the big one, which is the Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show, which is actually happening later this month. One of the biggest, if not the biggest in the world. And it draws people from all over the world. About 100,000 people that weekend are in Fort Lauderdale for this boat show. But even beyond that, there's always something happening along the Riverwalk. And it's not just a downtown thing. Out west in the suburbs, you have local community events that pull in pretty big crowds too. If you're in Weston, you have the Weston Town Center, which has a year-long calendar of events. These suburban areas have their own local traditions and events that kind of give it more of that small town, local community feel. So whether you're into food, art, music, or boats, there's really something for everybody no matter where you live out here. And that's one of the best things about Fort Lauderdale is there's no off season when it comes to fun. Now, something I hear often from a lot of people is, I want to live 10 minutes from the beach. And I'm here to tell you, you don't have to live right by the beach to enjoy Fort Lauderdale. And I get it, that's the dream for a lot of people, to be walkable to a beach or at least within 10 minutes, walkable to restaurants, just close to everything. It makes sense. But once people start actually looking at homes and figuring out what's most important to them for their lifestyle, most realize that they're probably not gonna end up being 10 minutes from the beach. And here's what surprises most buyers, especially those from out of state. East Fort Lauderdale isn't just about waterfront property. Even the older, more inland neighborhoods, they're pricey. As of right now, it's about $650,000 median sales price for a single family home. And that's typically built in the 50s or 60s, maybe about 1,500 square feet. possibly no garage, and probably in need of some updating. Waterfront, completely different ballgame. Anything with ocean access, even if it's a smaller canal home, you're starting in the millions, more like 2 million, and it's gonna climb up fast. And condos usually look more affordable at first glance, and there's a ton of them available, but one of the things that gets people is that you need 20 to 25% down, and the rising HOA fees and insurance costs post Surfside. Now the good news is that if you're open to being a little further west, your dollar may go a little bit further out that way. You'll often find newer homes, maybe built in the 80s, 90s, for either the same price or a little bit less than the same home in Fort Lauderdale that was built in the 60s, but you'll also find lower insurance rates, and you're still only 30 minutes from the beach. So before you fall in love with any specific home, make sure to get clear on your priorities, whether that's lifestyle, location, or just price point. And speaking of the suburbs around Fort Lauderdale are growing, but not with the kind of massive master plan developments you see in Central Florida or even Texas, but growing more so in terms of popularity. They still get everything South Florida has to offer, just with a little bit more space, maybe a newer home, and a sense of community that's harder to find in these older established areas. Places like Parkland, Coral Springs, and Weston are perfect examples, which I have videos on all of them, but they're known for their top-rated schools, quieter feel, and HOA communities with amenities. And Parkland specifically still has a few pockets of newer construction, gated communities with modern homes that you don't get that easily east of I-95. And if you head down toward the southwest part of Broward County, places like Pembroke Pines, Miramar, or Cooper City, there's still some land left for new developments and townhome projects which give you newer homes, good schools, and easy access to both Fort Lauderdale and Miami. And you're still only within 30 to 40 minutes to the beach, Las Olas, and the airport. Max, you'll probably be 45 minutes as far west as you can go. So by living in the suburbs, you're not missing out on what makes Fort Lauderdale great. You're just trading walkability and location for more space, better schools, and more of a community-focused lifestyle. And because demand for the suburbs keeps rising, prices are following. You can still find homes that feel affordable compared to East Fort Lauderdale, but that gap is starting to shrink a little bit. At the end of the day, the suburbs give you more of a balance while still being in proximity to everything that you want. This next one is probably one of my favorite things about living here, and that's the culture here in South Florida, not just in Fort Lauderdale, but across the entire Miami metro area. It's one big melting pot, probably one of the most diverse and international areas of the country outside of New York City. And the best part is Fort Lauderdale sits right in the middle of it all. You got the big city, Miami's energy and nightlife and culture just 45 minutes south. Then you have Palm Beach's luxury and calm to the north, and Fort Lauderdale bridges those two perfectly. Not to mention, if your vibe is a little bit more country or western, you got Davie and Southwest Ranches just to the west. And the best part about living here, and my job in particular, is I meet and speak to people every week who are moving or have moved to Fort Lauderdale, and they all have the exact same story. They came here having the same dream, probably the same one that you have, and it's just something that's cool to see. And the final thing on the list of 10 things that you need to know is that we're in one of the most interesting buyer-friendly markets that I've seen in my 6 years of living here. And we want to help you with your move. So if you're planning on buying or selling a home anywhere here in South Florida, we'd love to hear from you. You can call, text, or email us, or go to therealsouthflorida.com/YouTube, or you can jump the line and go ahead and book a one-on-one Zoom call with me directly, where we'll talk about your goals, lifestyle, and what it's like to buy a home right now. As always, I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you on the next one.